August 1881. A solitary man walks through the woods along Lake Silvaplana in the Swiss Alps. The air is thin at 6,000 feet above sea level. He stops before a massive pyramidal rock towering above him. In this moment, a thought strikes him with such force that it will change philosophy forever. Friedrich Nietzsche stood frozen before that stone, his mind exploding with an idea so profound, so terrifying, so beautiful, that it would take him years to fully express it. What if everything that has ever happened, everything you have ever experienced, every joy and every suffering, every triumph and every failure, repeats itself eternally? What if you had to live your exact life over and over again, forever, with no possibility of change? Most people would recoil in horror from such a thought. But Nietzsche saw in it something else, a test, a challenge, a way to measure whether you are truly living or merely existing. And from that single revelation emerged one of the strangest, most poetic, most misunderstood works in all of philosophy. Thus, Spoke Zarathustra is not a typical philosophy book. It reads like a biblical epic, filled with parables, prophecies, songs, and symbolic encounters. There are mountains and caves, desert wanderings and midnight visions, tightrope walkers and prophets, serpents and eagles. The language soars and plunges, dances and thunders. It feels less like reading philosophy and more like witnessing revelation. Yet beneath the poetry lies a revolutionary message that would shake Western civilization. Nietzsche was declaring war on 2,000 years of Christian values. He was proclaiming the death of God and demanding that humanity create entirely new values to replace the old ones. He was introducing the world to the Übermensch, the Overman, a new kind of human being who would transcend everything that came before. But who was this man making such audacious claims? Friedrich Nietzsche was born in 1844 in the small town of Rocken, Germany. His father was a Lutheran pastor who died when Nietzsche was only 5 years old. Growing up surrounded by women, his mother, sister, grandmother, and 2 aunts, Nietzsche developed into a brilliant but solitary child. He excelled at languages and became a professor of classical philology at the University of Basel at the impossibly young age of 24, before he had even completed his own doctorate. But his health was always fragile. Chronic migraines, eye problems, and digestive issues plagued him constantly. He served briefly as a medical orderly in the Franco-Prussian War, but returned home after contracting diphtheria and dysentery. His personal life was marked by loneliness. He fell deeply in love with Lou Andrea Salome, a brilliant young Russian woman, but she rejected his marriage proposal. This rejection devastated him, contributing to his growing isolation. He resigned from his professorship in 1879 due to poor health and spent the next decade wandering through Switzerland, Italy, and France, living in boarding houses, writing obsessively despite his suffering. During these wandering years, he wrote his most important works. And in those mountain solitudes, walking alone with his thoughts, he created Zarathustra. The book poured out of him in bursts of inspired frenzy. He claimed the first part came to him in just 10 days. He felt possessed by something larger than himself, as if the words were flowing through him from some unknown source. But the world was not ready for Zarathustra. When Part 1 was published in 1883, it sold almost no copies. Critics were baffled or hostile. The poetic style confused philosophers, while the philosophical content alienated literary readers. Nietzsche was forced to publish the final part privately at his own expense. Only 40 copies were printed, and he gave most of them away. The rejection crushed him, but he remained convinced that Thus Spoke Zarathustra was his masterpiece, his greatest gift to humanity. "I have given mankind the deepest book it possesses," he wrote. And though he could not know it, his assessment would prove correct. But first, tragedy would strike. In January 1889, Nietzsche suffered a complete mental collapse. The story goes that he saw a horse being whipped in the streets of Turin, Italy, and he threw his arms around the animal's neck, weeping. He was taken back to his lodgings, where he wrote bizarre, grandiose letters signing himself as Dionysus, or the Crucified. He never recovered his sanity. For the last 11 years of his life, Nietzsche lived in a twilight state, cared for first by his mother, and then by his sister Elizabeth. He died in 1900, having spent more than a decade unable to recognize or comprehend the growing fame of his ideas. He never knew that Thus Spoke Zarathustra would become one of the most influential books of the 20th century. But Nietzsche's sister Elizabeth was not a neutral caretaker of his legacy. She was a fervent German nationalist and anti-Semite, positions her brother had explicitly rejected during his life. After his death, she took control of his unpublished writings and carefully edited them to support her own political views. She presented Nietzsche as a prophet of German nationalism and racial superiority. This distortion would have catastrophic consequences. In the 1930s, Elizabeth introduced Nietzsche's work to Adolf Hitler. The Nazis eagerly adopted the concept of the Übermensch, twisting it into propaganda for their master race ideology. Nazi posters depicted the Übermensch as a blonde, blue-eyed Aryan Superman destined to rule over inferior races. This was a complete perversion of Nietzsche's actual philosophy. Nietzsche despised nationalism, calling it the scabies of the heart and blood poisoning. He mocked German culture and praised Jewish intellectuals. He explicitly rejected the idea of racial superiority. The Übermensch was not about genetics or ethnicity. It was about spiritual and philosophical transformation, available to anyone willing to undertake the difficult journey of self-overcoming. The Nazi appropriation haunted Nietzsche's reputation for decades. Many people still associate his ideas with fascism, never realizing this connection was manufactured by his sister and exploited by propagandists. Understanding Thus Spoke Zarathustra requires stripping away these layers of misinterpretation and encountering what Nietzsche actually wrote. So what is this book really about? At its core, Thus Spoke Zarathustra tells the story of a spiritual teacher who descends from his mountain cave to share his wisdom with humanity. The teacher is named Zarathustra, after the ancient Persian prophet Zoroaster, founder of one of the world's oldest religions. This choice was deliberate and ironic. The historical Zoroaster taught that the cosmos was a battle between good and evil gods, between light and darkness. Nietzsche blamed Zoroaster for inventing moral dualism, the idea that the universe is divided into absolute good and evil. By naming his prophet Zarathustra, Nietzsche was suggesting that the man who created morality must now come back to unmake it. Zarathustra must correct his ancient error and teach a completely new way of understanding value, meaning, and human purpose. He must announce that God is dead, that old moral systems have collapsed, and that humanity must now create entirely new values. The book unfolds in 4 parts, tracing Zarathustra's journey from his first attempts to teach the masses, through his growing understanding of his own message, to his ultimate confrontation with his darkest and most difficult idea. Along the way, he encounters disciples and skeptics, wise men and fools, seekers and mockers. He climbs mountains and descends into valleys. He experiences ecstasy and despair, hope and horror. Through all of this, 3 great ideas pulse through the narrative like heartbeats. The Übermensch, the concept of a human being who has overcome conventional humanity and created entirely new values. The will to power, the fundamental drive not merely to survive, but to grow, create, and overcome resistance. And the eternal recurrence, the terrifying and liberating idea that we might have to live our exact same life infinite times. These ideas are not presented as arguments to be proven. They emerge through stories, encounters, songs, and symbolic visions. Nietzsche is not trying to convince you through logic. He is trying to transform you through experience. He wants you to feel the weight of these ideas, to wrestle with them, to let them change how you see yourself and the world. Today, we will follow Zarathustra's journey through 3 acts. The descent, where Zarathustra comes down from his mountain and begins teaching about the death of God and the Übermensch. The transformation, where he explores the 3 metamorphoses of the spirit and what it means to create new values. And the revelation, where he confronts the most difficult idea of all, the eternal recurrence, and discovers what it truly means to say yes to life. This is the story of how one philosopher, in pain and isolation, created a work of such power that it would reshape modern thought. This is the journey toward becoming more than human. This is Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Act 1, The Descent, The Lonely Prophet. Zarathustra is 30 years old when he leaves civilization behind and climbs into the mountains. For 10 years he lived alone in a cave with only his eagle and his serpent for company. The eagle represents pride and the serpent represents wisdom. Together they symbolize what Zarathustra must become, proud in his wisdom and wise in his pride. But Zarathustra is not fleeing humanity out of bitterness or disappointment. He is preparing himself, like a cup that must be filled before it can pour out. Zarathustra spends a decade accumulating wisdom, allowing his insights to ripen, growing strong enough to bear the weight of his knowledge. His heart overflows with wisdom and love, and finally he can contain it no longer. He must descend from the mountain and share what he has learned. As he begins his descent, he encounters an old saint living as a hermit in the forest. The saint recognizes Zarathustra and remembers him from years before. "What are you bringing down to the valley?" the saint asks. Zarathustra replies that he brings gifts for humanity, that he loves people and wants to teach them. The saint laughs gently. "Don't trust people," he warns. "They will hate you for your gifts. Give them nothing but alms and let them beg for those." When Zarathustra asks what the saint does in his forest solitude, the old man replies that he makes songs and sings them to God, and he laughs, weeps, mumbles, and sings praises to the God who is his God. Zarathustra thanks the saint and continues down the mountain. But once he is alone again, he says to his heart, "Could it be possible? This old saint in his forest has not yet heard that God is dead." This brief encounter establishes the central problem of the entire book. The old saint represents the past, a world where God provided meaning, where religious devotion gave life purpose, and where traditional morality offered clear guidance. But that world is gone. God is dead, Nietzsche declares, and humanity has killed him. Not through any single act, but through the gradual process of modernity, science, reason, and enlightenment that has made the old religious worldview impossible to maintain with intellectual honesty. When Nietzsche says God is dead, he is not celebrating. He is diagnosing a crisis. For thousands of years, God provided the foundation for all values. Good and evil, right and wrong, meaning and purpose, all flowed from divine commandment. But what happens when that foundation crumbles? What happens when we can no longer believe in God yet still feel the weight of moral demands that originated in religious teaching? This is the crisis of nihilism, the terrifying possibility that nothing has meaning, that all values are arbitrary, that life itself might be pointless. Most people, Nietzsche believes, are not yet aware of this crisis. They go on living as if the old values still have force, not realizing the ground has disappeared beneath their feet. They are like cartoon characters who have run off a cliff but have not yet looked down. Zarathustra's mission is to make people look down, to force them to confront the crisis, and then to show them a way forward. He must help humanity move beyond the paralysis of nihilism toward something new, toward the creation of values that do not depend on God or any external authority. He must teach them about the Übermensch, the tightrope walker. Zarathustra arrives at a town called the Motley Cow, where a crowd has gathered to watch a tightrope walker perform. This is the perfect moment and the perfect audience for Zarathustra's first sermon. He positions himself in the marketplace and begins to speak. "I teach you the Übermensch," he proclaims. "Human beings are something that must be overcome. What have you done to overcome them?" He explains that all creatures have created something beyond themselves, and asks whether humanity wants to be the ebb of this great tide rather than flowing forward. What is the ape to a human? A laughingstock or a painful embarrassment? And that is exactly what the human shall be to the Übermensch, a laughingstock or a painful embarrassment. Man is a rope stretched between animal and Übermensch, Zarathustra declares, a rope over an abyss. The crossing is dangerous, the journey perilous, the looking back terrifying. What is great in human beings is that they are a bridge and not a goal. What can be loved in them is that they are a going over and a going under. This is Nietzsche's vision in compressed form. Humanity is not the pinnacle of creation, but a transition, a bridge between what we were and what we might become. We are poised between our animal origins and our potential to create something higher. The Übermensch represents that higher possibility, but reaching it requires crossing a dangerous abyss where most will fall. Zarathustra continues his sermon, but the crowd does not understand. They want entertainment, not philosophy. They want to see the tightrope walker, not hear about spiritual transformation. "We have heard enough about this rope dancer," someone shouts. "Let's see him now." The crowd laughs at Zarathustra, dismissing his words as the ravings of a madman. At that moment, the tightrope walker begins his performance. The man steps onto the rope stretched high above the marketplace. The crowd falls silent, watching with rapt attention. This is what they came for: danger, spectacle, the thrill of watching someone risk death for their amusement. The tightrope walker is halfway across when a jester, a clown in motley colors, emerges from the same tower and follows him onto the rope. The jester mocks the tightrope walker, calling him lazy, calling him an obstacle in his path. "Get out of my way or I'll jump over you," the jester shouts, then does exactly that, leaping over the tightrope walker with a terrifying shriek. The shock causes the tightrope walker to lose his balance. His body tumbles through the air and crashes to the ground. He lies broken and dying as the crowd scatters in panic. Only Zarathustra remains. He kneels beside the dying man, who asks with his last breath whether he is going to hell now. Zarathustra assures him there is no hell. "Your soul will be dead even sooner than your body. Therefore fear nothing anymore." The tightrope walker is relieved. He says he was just an animal who learned to do tricks through beatings and starvation. But at least he found dignity in his dangerous art. "Now," he says, "you make me into your animal." The man dies, and Zarathustra lifts the body onto his shoulders. He carries it through the town, looking for somewhere to bury it. But the townspeople fear that the body will attract wolves. They offer Zarathustra the body of the jester instead, but Zarathustra refuses. He will give this man a proper burial, he says. He lived through his art and for his art, and for this I will honor him. That night, Zarathustra places the body in a hollow tree and lies down beside it, unable to sleep. He reflects on what he has learned. This was a bad start, he thinks. Zarathustra, you want to become the teacher of humanity, but they are not ready. You speak to deaf ears. But as morning approaches, he has a revelation. He has been thinking about this wrong. He should not try to speak to the masses at all. The crowd is a herd, and the herd does not want to be disturbed from its comfortable grazing. Instead, he must seek out individuals who are already questioning, already searching, already feeling the pull towards something higher. Zarathustra shall not become the shepherd and dog of a herd, he declares to himself. To lure many away from the herd, that is why I have come. The people in the herd shall be angry with me. Zarathustra wants to be called a robber by the shepherds. He will seek companions, fellow creators who will help him plant the seeds of new values. He will find those rare individuals who can hear his message, who are brave enough to cross the dangerous rope stretched over the abyss. These will be his disciples, and through them, his teaching will spread. But first, he must clarify his message. He must explain what he means by overcoming humanity, what values must be destroyed, and what new values must be created. And to do this, he must tell them about the three metamorphoses. Three metamorphoses. In his second discourse, Zarathustra describes how the spirit undergoes three transformations on its journey toward freedom. These metamorphoses are not stages everyone passes through. They are stages that must be deliberately chosen, that require strength and courage to complete. Most people never even become camels, remaining forever at an earlier stage that Zarathustra does not bother to name, the stage of comfortable conformity. The first transformation is from spirit into camel. The camel is a beast of burden that kneels and asks, "What is the heaviest load I can carry?" This might seem like a weakness, but Zarathustra insists it requires great strength. The camel deliberately seeks out the most difficult, painful, humiliating tasks. What are these heavy burdens? Zarathustra lists them. To humiliate yourself to hurt your pride, to let your foolishness show to mock your wisdom, to abandon your cause when it triumphs, to climb high mountains to tempt the tempter. In other words, the camel takes on knowledge of everything painful and difficult in life. It carries the weight of truth, even when truth is ugly. It bears responsibility, even when responsibility is crushing. Most people flee from difficulty. They seek comfort, entertainment, distraction from anything challenging or disturbing. But the camel runs toward difficulty. It loads itself with knowledge of suffering, injustice, mortality, meaninglessness, all the heaviest things. And like an actual camel crossing a desert, it carries these burdens into a vast wilderness. Why would anyone choose this? Because without facing the full weight of existence, without staring into the abyss of meaninglessness, you remain naive. You believe in comfortable lies. The camel stage represents intellectual and emotional maturity, the willingness to confront reality no matter how harsh. But the camel is not the end. In the loneliest part of the desert, where no one can help or guide you, the second transformation occurs. The camel becomes a lion. The lion represents rebellion, refusal, the sacred no. Where the camel carries burdens, the lion fights them. It seeks to capture freedom and be master of its own wilderness. But to achieve freedom, the lion must battle the mightiest of all dragons, whose name is Thou Shalt. On every scale of this golden dragon glitters a commandment. Thou shalt honor thy father and mother. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt love thy neighbor. These are the values of thousands of years. The moral laws that society insists are sacred and unchangeable. The dragon claims to embody all created value, declaring, "All value has long been created, and I am all created value. Truly, there shall be no more I will." But the spirit of the lion says, "I will." The lion refuses to accept that values are fixed forever. It fights the dragon, seeking to prove that what has been called sacred is actually arbitrary, that what has been called eternal is actually historical, that what has been called necessary is actually chosen. The lion cannot create new values. That comes later. But it can create freedom for new creation. It clears the ground by destroying the old. This is the work of philosophers like Nietzsche himself, tearing down traditional morality, exposing its origins in human psychology rather than divine command, showing that what seemed natural and inevitable is actually contingent and changeable. But the lion's work is ultimately negative. It knows how to destroy but not how to build. It knows how to say no but not how to say yes. It lives in perpetual rebellion, defining itself against what it opposes. And so a third transformation is necessary. The lion must become a child. The child is innocent and forgetting, Zarathustra explains. It is a new beginning, a game, a self-propelled wheel, a first movement, a sacred yes. Why does the spirit need to become a child? Because for the game of creation, a sacred yes is needed. The spirit must will its own will. The outcast from the world must now win its own world. The child represents a radical new beginning, untainted by resentment or reaction. Unlike the lion, which is still defined by what it fights against, the child creates from its own center. It plays, not as escape or frivolity, but as the highest form of activity. It creates new values not because the old ones were wrong, though they were, but because creation itself is joyful and necessary. Think of actual children at play. They become completely absorbed in their games, investing them with total seriousness while remaining aware that they are games. They create rules, then change them. They build worlds, then destroy them and build new ones. They experience pure becoming without the weight of past or future. This is the spiritual state the Übermensch must achieve. The combination of the child's creativity and innocence with the lion's strength and the camel's endurance. Most people never become camels, remaining ignorant of life's heaviness. Some become camels but never transform into lions, spending their lives crushed under burdens they will not fight. A few become lions but remain stuck in rebellion, unable to move beyond negation into creation. Only the rarest souls complete all three metamorphoses and become children again, creators of new values, players of the game of existence, the death of God. Throughout the early discourses, Zarathustra returns again and again to the theme that traditional religious and moral systems have collapsed. He calls believers in the afterlife afterworlders and mocks them for despising the body and this earth. Once the soul looked contemptuously upon the body, Zarathustra says, and then this contempt was the highest. It wanted the body thin, ghastly, starved. Thus it thought to escape from the body and the earth. The religious worldview taught that the body was shameful, that earthly pleasures were sinful, and that true life came only after death. This created a profound hatred of existence itself. But this otherworldliness was born from suffering, Zarathustra insists. It was the sick and dying who despised the body and the earth, who invented heavenly things and redemptive drops of blood. Unable to find meaning or joy in life, they invented another world where justice would finally prevail, where the meek would inherit everything, and where suffering would be compensated. Nietzsche saw this as a form of psychological revenge. Those who were weak in life, who could not achieve power or happiness through their own strength, created a moral system that declared weakness itself virtuous. They called strength evil and weakness good. They transformed their inability to take revenge into a moral principle of forgiveness. They made a virtue out of necessity. This is what Nietzsche called slave morality. Morality invented by the powerless as compensation for their powerlessness. It stands opposed to master morality, the value system of the strong who simply declare good whatever enhances their power and bad whatever diminishes it. Zarathustra is not advocating cruelty or domination. That completely misses the point. He is asking, what values do we need to affirm life rather than deny it? What kind of morality says yes to existence instead of no? What would it mean to find meaning and purpose in this world rather than postponing them to an imaginary next one? The answer cannot be found by clinging to religious frameworks after the death of God. When people stop believing in God but continue following Christian moral commands, they are living an incoherent life. They have lost the foundation but are trying to keep the structure. Zarathustra calls these people the last man, the final degenerate form of humanity. The last man has made everything small. He has small pleasures and small poisons. He works a little and enjoys himself a little, both in moderation. He wants no ruler and no master. Everyone wants to be equal. Who still wants to rule, who obey? Both are too burdensome, the last man says. The last man values comfort above all. He avoids anything difficult or dangerous. He seeks security, predictability, and safety. He is satisfied with shallow entertainment and cheap thrills. He has no great loves or great hates. Nothing is sacred to him, but he is too lazy to truly desecrate anything either. He is the perfect democratic consumer, happy in his mediocrity, proud of having eliminated all distinctions between higher and lower. We have invented happiness, say the last men, and they blink. Zarathustra presents this as a warning, but when he describes the last man to the crowd in the marketplace, they respond, "Give us this last man, O Zarathustra. Make us into these last men, and we will give you the Übermensch." They completely miss his horror at what humanity is becoming. This is the nightmare scenario that Nietzsche sees. Not just the death of God, but the triumph of mediocrity, the leveling down of all human aspiration, the creation of a world where everyone is equally comfortable and equally small, where no one strives for greatness because greatness itself has been abolished as an ideal. Against this vision, Zarathustra offers the Übermensch, not a superman in terms of power over others, but a human being who has overcome the limitations of conventional humanity, who creates values that affirm rather than deny life, who says yes to existence with all its terror and beauty. Act 2. The transformation, the teachers and the lessons. After his initial failure in the marketplace, Zarathustra spends years teaching his disciples. Part 2 of Thus Spoke. Zarathustra consists largely of his discourses on specific topics, each one attacking some aspect of traditional morality or conventional wisdom. He speaks against the compassionate who pity others not from love, but from weakness, who want everyone to be equally miserable. He mocks the virtuous who follow moral rules to earn praise or heavenly reward, making virtue into a transaction. He condemns the preachers of death, who make life into a punishment to be endured rather than a gift to be celebrated. One of his most important teachings concerns the new idol that has replaced God, the state. State? Zarathustra asks. What is that? Well now, open your ears, for now I shall speak to you about the death of peoples. Somewhere there are still peoples and herds, he explains. But not with us, my brothers. Here there are states. The state claims to be the people, but it is actually the death of peoples. It is the cold monster that says, I, the state, am the people. Everything about the state is false, Zarathustra declares. It speaks in stolen tongues, calls stolen beliefs good and evil. Everything about it is false. It bites with stolen teeth. Even its bowels are false. The state was created by those who could not create their own meaning, by superfluous people who needed to band together and follow a leader who would tell them what to do. Where the state ends, that is where the man who is not superfluous begins. Where the song of the necessary man begins, the unique and irreplaceable melody. Beyond the state lies the possibility of genuine individuality, of becoming who you truly are rather than playing a role assigned by the collective. This teaching is especially important given how Nietzsche's ideas would later be twisted to support totalitarianism. Zarathustra explicitly rejects the state as a path to greatness. True human flourishing happens despite the state, not through it. The Übermensch is not a dictator or a Führer, but someone who has learned to live by self-created values, without needing the state to provide meaning. Zarathustra also speaks about friendship, love, marriage, and death. He teaches that true friendship requires hardness, that you must be willing to challenge your friends rather than simply comfort them. He insists that love of the distant future is more valuable than love of one's neighbor, because love of the neighbor often comes from an inability to love oneself. On marriage, he is surprisingly traditional in some ways, arguing that marriage should be about creating something higher than either partner alone, ideally a child. But he also argues that most marriages are lies because the partners have not overcome themselves first. Whether it is your pity or your courage that wants to get away, whether you are seeking a companion or seeking distraction, in every case it is not love. And on death, he teaches that one should die at the right time, that hanging on to life when you have completed your work is as wrong as dying before you have given your gift to the world. Many die too late, and some die too early. The teaching still sounds strange. Die at the right time. These teachings outraged his contemporaries and continue to provoke debate. Nietzsche seems cold, harsh, and unfeeling. Where is compassion? Where is kindness? Where is the recognition that most people are suffering and need comfort, not challenges? But Nietzsche would argue that false compassion does more harm than true hardness. Pitying someone often means looking down on them, treating them as weak and helpless. Challenging someone, demanding they become stronger, respects their potential to grow. The truly compassionate act is not to enable weakness, but to inspire strength. This leads to one of Zarathustra's most controversial teachings, the idea of self-overcoming. Self-overcoming and will to power. Only where there is life is there also will, Zarathustra teaches, but not will to life, rather, will to power. This concept, the will to power, is perhaps Nietzsche's most famous and most misunderstood idea. It has been interpreted as everything from biological instinct to fascist ideology. But in Zarathustra's teaching, will to power means something quite specific. The fundamental drive of all living things is not merely to survive, but to grow, expand, create, and overcome resistance. Think of a plant growing toward the sun. It does not merely exist, it strives. It pushes through concrete, climbs walls, and competes with neighboring plants for light and nutrients. Or think of a child learning to walk, falling and rising again and again, driven by an internal need to master this new ability, even though crawling would be safer and easier. This striving, this push toward growth and mastery, is will to power. It is not primarily about dominating others, though that can be one expression of it. It is about becoming more than you currently are, about continuous self-overcoming, that the living creature willingly sacrifices itself for the sake of power. That is your doctrine. Zarathustra tells life itself in a mystical dialogue. And you whispered this secret to me. See, I am that which must always overcome itself. Life continually creates values, then destroys and recreates them. What is often referred to as self-preservation is actually self-overcoming. The organism does not seek to maintain itself exactly as it is, but constantly strives to become stronger, more complex, more capable. Stagnation is death. Growth requires destroying what you were to become what you will be. This means that all values are expressions of will to power. When people create moral systems, they are not discovering eternal truths about right and wrong. They are establishing conditions under which their particular form of life can flourish. Different types of humans create different moralities. The weak create moralities that protect weakness, that make helplessness into virtue. They call patience humility, the inability to take revenge, forgiveness, and cowardice meekness. They invent gods who will punish the strong and reward the weak. This is their will to power expressing itself through the only means available to them. The strong create moralities that celebrate strength, courage, nobility, and excellence. They simply declare good whatever enhances their power and bad whatever diminishes it. They need no supernatural sanctions because they are confident in their own judgment. This is their will to power expressing itself directly. Neither morality is true in an absolute sense. Both are tools created by different types of life to serve their different needs. The question is not which is true, but which you want to affirm. Do you want to celebrate life ascending or life declining, growth or decay, strength or weakness? Zarathustra chooses life ascending. He wants values that say yes to existence, that affirm the struggle, that make growth and becoming the highest goods. This requires self-overcoming, the willingness to destroy what you are for the sake of what you might become. Man is something that must be overcome, he repeats throughout his teachings. But this does not mean humanity is bad or shameful. It means humanity is not finished, not complete. We are a transition, a bridge. Our greatest glory is not in what we are, but in what we might become. But self-overcoming requires tremendous courage. It means abandoning security, risking everything, enduring pain and doubt and loneliness. It means climbing mountains where you might fall. And it means confronting the most difficult idea Zarathustra has to teach, the idea that haunted Nietzsche himself as he stood before that pyramidal rock in the Alps. The vision of the eternal return. Part 3 of Thus Spoke. Zarathustra contains the book's emotional and philosophical climax. Zarathustra has gathered disciples, taught them his doctrines, and is preparing to share his most profound and terrible insight. But first, he must confront it fully himself. In the chapter called On the Vision and the Riddle, Zarathustra describes climbing a mountain path with a dwarf on his shoulders. The dwarf represents the spirit of gravity, the weight that pulls everything down, that makes life burdensome rather than joyful. The dwarf mocks Zarathustra, saying he cannot throw a stone up without it falling back down, that gravity will always win. Angry, Zarathustra stops at a gateway. Two paths meet there, stretching infinitely in opposite directions. One goes backward into the past, the other forward into the future. The name of the gateway is Moment. Zarathustra challenges the dwarf. Look at this gateway. It has two faces. Two paths come together here. No one has yet walked them to the end. This long lane backward, it lasts an eternity. And that long lane outward, that is another eternity. They contradict each other, these paths. They blatantly offend each other. And here at this gateway is where they come together. The name of the gateway is inscribed above, Moment. Then he asks the crucial question, must not everything that can happen have already happened, been done, run past? If the backward path stretches infinitely into the past, then infinite time has already elapsed. Everything that could possibly happen must have already happened at some point. And if it happened once, must it not happen again? Must not this gateway too have been here before? Zarathustra asks. And are not all things knotted together so tightly that this moment draws after it all things to come? Therefore itself too? For everything that can run must also run once more forward down this long lane. This is the doctrine of eternal recurrence in its most compressed form. If time is infinite, and the universe contains a finite number of possible states, then every possible configuration must eventually repeat. You, reading these words right now, must have done so infinite times before, and will do so infinite times again. Every joy and every sorrow, every triumph and every failure, Every moment of your existence will recur eternally. The dwarf dismisses this as simple circular time. All truth is crooked, the dwarf says contemptuously. Time itself is a circle. But Zarathustra rejects this simplification. The eternal recurrence is not mechanical repetition, but something far more profound and terrifying. Before he can explain further, the vision shifts. Zarathustra sees a young shepherd writhing on the ground with a heavy black snake hanging from his mouth. The snake has crawled down the shepherd's throat and bitten itself fast there. Zarathustra tries to pull it out, but cannot. Then a voice cries from him, "Bite! Bite its head off! Bite!" The shepherd bites down with a tremendous effort and spits the snake's head far away. Then he leaps up, no longer a shepherd, no longer even human, transformed and surrounded by light, laughing as no human has ever laughed before. What does this vision mean? Zarathustra never explains it directly, but the symbolism is clear. The snake represents the thought of eternal recurrence itself, the idea that threatens to choke whoever tries to swallow it. Most people cannot bear this thought. The weight of it crushes them. To live the same life over and over eternally, making the same mistakes, suffering the same pains, experiencing the same regrets, this seems like the ultimate curse. But the shepherd who bites through the snake's head, who fully accepts the eternal recurrence, is transformed. He becomes something beyond human, laughing with superhuman joy. He has passed the ultimate test. He can say yes to his life so completely that he would willingly live it again and again forever. This is the thought that Nietzsche believed could transform humanity. The eternal recurrence is not meant to be a scientific theory about the nature of time. It is a test, a measuring stick, a way of evaluating your life. Ask yourself, if you had to live your exact life over and over again eternally, with no possibility of change, would you be crushed by despair or filled with joy? If every petty action, every wasted hour, every moment of cowardice and weakness will recur infinitely, can you bear that weight? Or does the thought make you want to transform your life immediately? The eternal recurrence distinguishes between those who say yes to life and those who say no. If you are living a life you are ashamed of, if you are constantly fleeing from yourself, if you fill your days with distractions and denials, then the thought of eternal recurrence will be torture. You will want time to be linear so that mistakes can be left behind, so that you can imagine some future redemption that erases the past. But if you are living a life of growth and creation, if you are becoming who you truly are, if you can look back on even your worst moments and say, "This too was necessary, this too made me who I am," then the eternal recurrence becomes the ultimate affirmation. You would not change anything. You would live it all again, the same infinite times, and call it good. This is what the Übermensch must achieve. Amor fati, love of fate, the ability to say yes to existence so completely that you affirm every moment of it. Not passive acceptance, but active affirmation. Not resignation, but celebration. Nietzsche himself struggled with this idea. It haunted him, filled him with both exhilaration and dread. He wrote in his notebooks, "This doctrine is mild towards those who do not believe in it. It speaks of no hells and promises no rewards. Whoever does not believe in it has a fleeting life in their consciousness. But for those who do believe, the eternal recurrence changes everything. Every action becomes infinitely significant because it will be repeated eternally. Every choice becomes a choice for all time. The question is no longer, what do I want in this moment, but what do I want eternally? The stillest hour." After the vision of the eternal recurrence, Zarathustra returns to his cave. But he cannot yet fully teach this doctrine because he has not yet fully accepted it himself. In a chapter called The Stillest Hour, he describes a mystical experience where a voice speaks to him, commanding him to say the words he knows but refuses to speak. "You know it, Zarathustra," the voice says, "but you do not speak it." What is this knowledge that terrifies Zarathustra so much that he cannot voice it? The eternal recurrence itself. The thought that even the small, the petty, the mediocre will recur eternally. "Alas, man recurs eternally," the voice tells him. "The small man recurs eternally." This is what Zarathustra cannot bear. He can accept that his own moments of greatness will recur. He can even accept that his suffering will recur. But the thought that all human pettiness, all mediocrity, all the small-mindedness and cruelty and stupidity will also recur eternally, this nauseates him. I saw man shrink and shrink again, he confesses later. The eternal recurrence even of the smallest. That was my nausea at all existence. The small man who wants nothing more than comfort and safety, who has no great aspirations, who is satisfied with shallow pleasures, he too will recur eternally. There is no escape from him, no final overcoming, no ultimate victory over mediocrity. This is the crisis that drives Zarathustra back into solitude. He must learn to accept not just the eternal recurrence of what is noble, but the eternal recurrence of everything, including what he despises. He must find a way to say yes even to this. The stillest hour, the voice that speaks to him, tells him he must go away and become ripe. You must become still and ripen and sweet and mellow and golden, until you stand like a tree in its autumn, weighty with fruit and concealing its sweetness. Only when he has ripened enough, when he has grown strong enough to bear the full weight of his own teaching, can he return to share it with humanity. And so Zarathustra leaves his disciples once more and returns to his cave. Years pass, he ages, he struggles, and finally he is ready for the ultimate confrontation with his most difficult thought. Act 3, the revelation, the convalescent. Part 4 of Thus Spoke. Zarathustra takes place years after Part 3. Zarathustra has become old. His hair is white. He has spent years alone in his cave, wrestling with the eternal recurrence, trying to fully accept it, trying to learn to say yes to everything. In the chapter called The Convalescent, Zarathustra finally speaks the doctrine aloud. He calls out to his animals, his eagle and his serpent. Speak and bear witness. Who are you? Who is alive here around me? His animals respond. We know what you teach, that all things recur eternally, and we ourselves with them, and that we have been here infinite times already, and all things with us. You teach that there is a great year of becoming, a monster of a great year, which must turn itself over again and again like an hourglass, so that it may run down and run out anew. But they also warn him, beware that you do not become a grave for yourself. This is what threatens you, that you choke yourself with your own truth, that you yourself become frozen by the winter of your own contempt. Zarathustra has been in danger of being crushed by his own doctrine. The weight of eternal recurrence, the nausea at the thought that the small man recurs eternally, has made him sick. He has been bedridden for 7 days, wrestling with the abyss. But now he rises. He has passed through his illness and emerged stronger. He has learned to accept the eternal recurrence completely, including the recurrence of everything he finds contemptible. This acceptance does not mean approval. It means recognizing that existence includes both the noble and the base, both the creative and the destructive, both the beautiful and the ugly, and that all of it together makes up the whole that must be affirmed. All things are entangled, enmeshed, enamored, Zarathustra realizes. If ever you wanted one thing twice, if ever you said, you please me happiness, instant, moment, then you want it all back again. All anew, all eternally, all entangled, enmeshed, enamored. This is the key insight. You cannot affirm one moment without affirming all moments, because they are interconnected. Your moment of joy exists only because of all the moments that led to it, including the painful ones. If you truly want that joy to recur, you must want everything that made it possible to recur as well. This leads to a profound acceptance of necessity. Not the fatalism that says nothing matters because everything is predetermined, but the recognition that your life is a unity, that every part of it connects to every other part, that you cannot cherry-pick which moments you want to keep and which you want to discard. The person who can say, yes, let this exact life recur eternally, has achieved something remarkable. They have transformed all it was into, thus I willed it. They have claimed their entire existence as their own creation, taking full responsibility for what they have become. This is the ultimate expression of amor fati. Not just accepting fate but loving it, not just enduring necessity, but embracing it as your own will. The eternal recurrence reveals that will and necessity are not opposites. When you will your fate completely, when you say yes to everything that has happened because it made you who you are, will and necessity become identical. The higher men. In the final sections of Part 4, a series of visitors arrives at Zarathustra's cave. These are what Zarathustra calls the higher men, individuals who have risen above the common herd, but have not yet become the Übermensch. First come two kings who are disgusted by mob rule and democracy. They seek a new nobility based not on birth, but on virtue. Zarathustra respects their rebellion against mediocrity, but sees that they still define themselves in opposition to the masses, rather than from their own center. Next arrives the conscientious man of the spirit, a scholar who has devoted his life to studying leeches. Zarathustra sees dedication in him, but also narrowness, someone who has mastered one tiny corner of knowledge while remaining ignorant of everything that matters. Then comes the magician, who represents art and deception. He can manipulate emotions and create beautiful illusions, but he has lost touch with genuine feelings. He is all performance, all surface, empty inside despite his skill. The ugliest man arrives, someone so hideous that even Zarathustra struggles to look at him. This is the murderer of God, the man who could not bear being seen by an all-seeing eye and so killed it. He represents the resentment and revenge at the heart of much atheism, the desire to destroy God not from strength but from shame. Two more visitors arrive, the voluntary beggar who has sought wisdom among the poor and discovered only their contentment with small things, and the shadow, which represents Zarathustra's own doubts and second thoughts, the part of himself that questions whether his quest is worth the suffering. Finally comes the old soothsayer who prophesied to Zarathustra years ago, who sees only darkness and meaninglessness in the future, who is nihilism incarnate. All these higher men gather in Zarathustra's cave. They are the best that the current age has produced, yet none of them has become the Übermensch. Each has overcome conventional humanity in some way, but each remains stuck, unable to complete the transformation. Zarathustra teaches them about the eternal recurrence, about self-overcoming, about saying yes to existence. But in the end, he realizes they are not ready. They can understand intellectually, but they cannot live the teaching. They are bridges that will not be crossed, preparations for something that will come later. Late at night, Zarathustra hears a strange sound. The higher men have found wine in his cave and gotten drunk. They are singing a drunken hymn to an ass, worshipping it as a god, bowing down before it, and giving thanks. The ass represents the very stupidity and superstition that Zarathustra thought he had left behind. Zarathustra is horrified. Even these higher men, when faced with the void left by God's death, cannot resist creating a new idol to worship. They prefer even an ass god to no God at all. They would rather believe in anything than face the abyss of meaninglessness. But then the ugliest man, the murderer of God, explains, "It is better to worship God in this form than in no form." Think about that saying, you higher men. Perhaps you will discover its hidden meaning. Truly, this is only a festival, a ceremony, something that comforts us. We are not serious. They are not truly worshiping the ass. They are mocking worship itself, playing with sacred forms now that the sacred has been emptied of meaning. But Zarathustra sees that this is not enough. Playful nihilism, ironic detachment, mocking everything while believing in nothing, this is not the way forward. "Did I not forbid you to worship?" he asks them. "You higher men learn this from me. In the marketplace, no one believes in higher men. And if you want to speak there, very well. But the mob blinks and says, 'We are all equal.'" The higher men are still too dependent on the mob, too reactive, too defined by what they oppose. They can mock the old gods, but cannot create new values. They can see through conventional morality, but cannot affirm life without it. They remain suspended over the abyss, unable to cross. The sign. On the morning after the festival of the ass, Zarathustra emerges from his cave to find a changed world. His animals tell him, "All the world waits for you like a garden. All things want to become your physicians and comforters. They want to be friends to your happiness." Zarathustra reflects on his long journey. He has taught, struggled, descended into darkness and risen again. He has confronted the eternal recurrence and learned to say yes to it. He has gathered disciples and found them wanting. He has waited for the sign that would tell him his time has finally come. "This is my morning, my day begins," he announces. "Up now, up, you great noon." The great noon represents the moment of decision, the point at which humanity can transform itself. It is midday, when the sun is at its zenith, when shadows are shortest, when everything is revealed in the harsh light of truth. What is the sign that his time has come? As Zarathustra leaves his cave, a lion appears. Not just any lion, but his lion, the one he once helped and befriended. The lion is now surrounded by a flock of doves, gentleness and fierceness combined. The lion roars with joy and nuzzles against Zarathustra. This is the sign. The predator and the prey existing together without conflict, strength and gentleness united. The overcoming of opposition in a higher synthesis. The lion no longer needs to define itself through violence. The doves no longer fear the lion. Each has transformed through encounter with the other. Zarathustra understands. His children are ready. Not the higher men in his cave. They remain stuck in their limitations. But somewhere out there, a new generation is growing. Those who will complete what he has begun. "My children are near," he says. "My children." The children he refers to are not biological offspring, but spiritual descendants. Those who will inherit his teaching and carry it forward. They will be the ones who finally cross the bridge from human to Übermensch. The book ends with Zarathustra leaving his cave, glowing like the morning sun, strong as a lion, ready to descend once more to humanity. But this time it is different. He is not going down to teach or to save or to convince. He is going to meet his destiny, to find those rare individuals who are ready for transformation. Zarathustra went down the mountain alone, the book concludes, and no one met him. The ending is deliberately ambiguous. Has Zarathustra succeeded or failed? Are his children real or imagined? Will the Übermensch ever actually appear? Nietzsche leaves these questions unanswered because they are not questions to be answered but lived. The message for today: Thus Spoke Zarathustra was Nietzsche's attempt to write a secular scripture, a new Bible for a world after God. But what does this strange, poetic, prophetic book offer us today, more than a century after Nietzsche's death? At its core, Zarathustra is about the crisis of meaning in the modern world. When traditional sources of value collapse, when religion loses its authority, when science reveals a universe indifferent to human concerns, how do we find meaning? How do we determine what is good, what is worth pursuing, what makes life worth living? Nietzsche's answer is radical. We must create meaning ourselves. We cannot find it in God or nature or society or tradition. We must become artists of our own lives, creating values through our choices and actions, taking full responsibility for who we become. This is terrifying because it means there are no guarantees, no cosmic safety net, no ultimate redemption. If we create poorly, if we build our lives on weak foundations, if we follow values that diminish rather than enhance life, we have no one to blame but ourselves. But it is also liberating. We are not bound by inherited values that may no longer serve us. We can examine our beliefs, question our assumptions, and deliberately choose what we want to affirm. We can become authors rather than characters, creators rather than creatures. The eternal recurrence serves as the ultimate test of whether you are living authentically. If you would not want to live your exact life again, eternally and unchangeably, then you are not living as you truly wish. You are lying to yourself, following values you do not genuinely believe in, playing roles rather than being yourself. This does not mean you should always be happy or never experience pain. It means living in such a way that you can affirm even your suffering as necessary, as part of what made you who you are. It means pursuing goals that remain valuable even when achieved, creating rather than consuming, growing rather than stagnating. The concept of the Übermensch challenges us to ask, what would it mean to overcome conventional humanity? Not to dominate others, but to transcend our own limitations. Not to impose our will on the world, but to align our will with our highest possibilities. This requires the three metamorphoses. First, we must be willing to bear the weight of truth, to confront reality without comforting illusions. We must become camels carrying the burden of knowledge. Second, we must rebel against inherited values, fighting the dragon of thou shalt. We must become lions, creating freedom through the destruction of the old. Third, we must learn to create from innocence rather than reaction, to say yes from our own center rather than defining ourselves against what we oppose. We must become children, playing the game of creation with utter seriousness and complete joy. Few complete this journey. Most remain comfortable in conventional values, never becoming camels. Some become camels, but break under the weight, crushed by nihilism. A few become lions, but remain stuck in perpetual rebellion, unable to move beyond negation. The rarest souls become children again, creators of new values, affirmers of existence. These are the potential Übermenschen, scattered through history, never fully realized, but always pointing toward what humanity might become. Nietzsche was not prescribing a specific set of values. He was describing a process, a way of relating to values themselves. The point is not to adopt Nietzsche's particular preferences, but to take responsibility for your own valuing, to create consciously and deliberately rather than accepting passively. This makes Nietzsche both more radical and less dangerous than his critics often claim. He is not advocating for any particular political system or social structure. He is not giving commandments about how to live. He is challenging each individual to examine their own life and ask, am I living in such a way that I could affirm it eternally? Am I creating or merely consuming? Am I growing or stagnating? Am I becoming who I truly am, or playing a role assigned by others? These questions remain urgent today. We live in a world where traditional authorities have weakened, but nothing clear has replaced them. We have unprecedented freedom to choose our own values, our own lifestyles, our own meanings. But this freedom often feels like a burden rather than a gift. Many respond by fleeing into distraction, entertainment, consumerism, social media, anything to avoid the weight of freedom. Others retreat into nostalgia, trying to resurrect religious or political certainties that no longer convince. Still others embrace ironical nihilism, mocking everything while believing in nothing. Zarathustra offers a fourth option: to embrace the burden of freedom as the highest opportunity. To recognize that meaning is not found but created. To understand that the death of God does not mean the death of value, but the beginning of genuine valuing. To see human existence not as a problem to be solved, but as a work of art to be created. This is difficult. It requires strength, courage, and persistence. It means abandoning the comfort of absolute certainty and living with the knowledge that you might be wrong, that your creations might fail, that you are responsible for your own becoming. But Nietzsche believed this difficulty is what makes human life glorious. We are the animals who can question our own existence, who can choose our own values, who can transform ourselves through will and thought. We are bridges suspended over an abyss, and our greatness lies not in reaching solid ground, but in the courage to remain suspended, to keep crossing, to continually overcome ourselves. The Übermensch is not a destination, but a direction. It is the possibility of continuous growth, perpetual self-overcoming, endless creation. It is what we might become if we dare to live without the safety net of pre-given meaning, if we take full responsibility for our own values, if we can say yes to life, even in its most difficult moments. I teach you the Übermensch, Zarathustra proclaims at the beginning of his journey, but by the end we realize he cannot teach it. He can only point toward it, model it, challenge others to discover it for themselves. The Übermensch is not a doctrine to be learned, but a possibility to be lived. The unfinished project. Nietzsche died without completing his philosophical system. He had planned a major work called The Will to Power that would systematically present his mature philosophy, but the mental collapse prevented him from writing it. His sister later published a book under that title, cobbled together from his notes and distorted by her own prejudices. Thus, Spoke Zarathustra remains his most complete artistic and philosophical statement. It is both the most accessible and the most difficult of his works. Accessible because it tells stories rather than arguing propositions. Difficult because the meaning of those stories is deliberately ambiguous. This ambiguity was intentional. Nietzsche did not want disciples who would simply repeat his words. He wanted individuals who would think for themselves, who would use his ideas as tools for their own transformation rather than as dogmas to be defended. You had not yet sought yourselves when you found me, Zarathustra tells his disciples. Thus do all believers. Now I bid you lose me and find yourselves, and only when you have all denied me will I return to you. This is the ultimate message of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, the teacher who teaches you to outgrow the teacher, the philosophy that demands you create your own philosophy, the values that push you to create your own values. Nietzsche's influence on modern culture is incalculable. His ideas shaped existentialism, postmodernism, depth psychology, and countless artistic movements. His critique of morality forced philosophy to examine its hidden assumptions. His proclamation of God's death articulated something many felt but few dared to say openly, yet he remains controversial, misunderstood, and feared. The Nazi appropriation permanently stained his reputation. His harsh rhetoric alienates many readers. His apparent lack of compassion troubles those who believe philosophy should comfort rather than challenge. But for those willing to wrestle with his ideas, Nietzsche offers something rare. A philosophy that takes human existence seriously enough to demand the best from us. He refuses to offer easy consolations or comfortable lies. He insists we face reality without illusion and find ways to affirm it nonetheless. The question Zarathustra poses remains unanswered. Will humanity transform itself or remain forever human, all too human? Will we create new values worthy of a godless universe or cling to inherited values that no longer convince? Will we become Übermenschen or last men? Nietzsche did not live to see the answer. Neither will we. But his challenge echoes across the decades. Dare to create yourself. Dare to examine your values. Dare to say yes to existence. Dare to live in such a way that you will it eternally. This is not a message of comfort. It is a message of challenge, of difficulty, of responsibility. But for those who hear it and respond, it offers something more valuable than comfort. The possibility of becoming who you truly are, of living a life you can affirm completely, of transforming yourself from creature into creator. The prophet Zarathustra descends from his mountain at the beginning and the end of the book. Between those descents lies the journey of transformation that anyone can undertake but few complete. The mountain still stands. The path still leads upward. The question is whether we dare to climb.